Good morning, everyone. My name is David Chalker, ATRA Technical Advisor. And this morning I will be presenting the VW Audi Mini 09G Internal and Diagnostic Webinar. So welcome, everyone, to today's presentation. And let us thank our sponsors, without whom this would not be possible to put these webinars on for you all. So let us thank TransStar, WIT, System 1, Toledo Driveline, Seal Aftermarket Products, and of course, ATRA and Gears Magazine. So again, welcome to today's webinar. And let's start with the quick video announcement.
I'm Dave. This is my cage. All right, welcome to Dave in the Cage, my favorite place to be. It's where I get my hands dirty. It's where I get to check out new stuff. Programming. If you're not doing it, you're missing the money, or you're paying for it at the end when you should have done it up front. If you're paying somebody to come, a remote programmer, if you're buying expensive subscriptions, if you're towing it to the dealer, let TransStar help you save money with our wrap kit. Remote assisted programming. Everything you need, one box, and it's free. Pay per use. But to have everything you need in one box, and it's simple, is free. When you get the wrap kit, it's as simple as opening the box, plugging it into the OBD, plug it into your wall outlet, make a phone call. The rest is done. It's that simple. Either contact your sales rep or go to transtar1.com/wrap info. It's that simple, and you're on your way to programming in-house. Saves you time and money, and makes for a happy customer at the end.
The wrap kit. For you guys that are already doing your own reprogramming and you've got your gear, I think that's awesome. If you're, dragging the cars to the dealer every time you've got to do a reprogram or a reflash, you might consider the wrap kit. Great value for your customer and great value for you. So again, these webinars would not be available. They wouldn't be available for you if it were not for our sponsors. So again, we just want to thank all of our sponsors and thank you for attending. And if you look to the right of the screen, you'll see your upcoming webinar dates. Our next webinar is on the 22nd of this month for the REO F10A CVT. Then we've got 68 RFE, 6R80, another Nissan type CVT, and of course the 6T70. You don't want to miss these, so we look forward to seeing you. Save the date, Expo 2017. If you haven't been to Expo before, you need to go. Not only is it a great time and money well spent, you're going to learn a bunch. You're going to have great stuff to take with you back to your shops. It's a great place to market your business, to network, meet new people, and gain some other friendships with people from all around the country. It's just a great time. So it's at Paris, Las Vegas again this year. If you have not registered, do so. And if you haven't, give me a call, shoot me an email, and I'll certainly help you out. If you have any questions or comments, send emails to webinars@atra.com. And if you have any questions, during the webinar, just shoot a text in at any time. We'd love to answer your questions. The handout is available as a download now. If you do not have the handout, click on the icon in the question box and get that download handout now. So let's get started. The 09G and 09M transmission is used in a wide variety of applications. Therefore, there are going to be a number of differences that will be found with regard to clutch capacity and gear ratios and things like that. They will vary model to model based on engine size and torque load requirements. Because of that, there are going to be a number of different case and part configurations that you're going to encounter when working on these. For instance, some of these units, such as the 09G, have a heat exchanger, which is attached directly to the top of the transmission, while other units, the 09M, they will use a remote heat exchanger for the cooling system. As you see the different years of these vehicles, they started out in 02 in the Mini Cooper, and they're still using them today. So there's a lot of these out there, and a great way to make some money for your shop. Here's your clutch apply chart. And if you'll notice, if you look, for instance, at the K1 clutch and your K2 clutch, your K1 clutch with the X's there, that shows when the clutch is applied, and the box is empty when the clutch is not applied. So that K1 clutch is your 1, 2, 3, 4 clutch. Your K2 clutch is your 4, 5, 6, or you might call it the overdrive clutch. Your K3 is going to be your 3, 5 reverse clutch. Your B1 is going to be your 2, 6 clutch. And your B2 is going to be your reverse clutch, as well as an engine braking clutch in first gear in the Tiptronic mode only. So when you're in Tiptronic mode first gear, that B2 will be brought on for engine braking. You've also got a Sprag in this unit. So if you'll notice, the common theme on this 6-speed is how the clutches are applied. You've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, a 4, 5, 6, 3, 5 reverse, and 2, 6, and a low reverse. And that's common on a lot of the 6-speeds that are out there today. So you'll recognize that that combination and that similarity. Here we have a solenoid apply chart. Again, with the X's show when the solenoid is electrically applied. When the computer is commanding that solenoid on, the empty boxes are when that solenoid is off. So you'll notice on that N92 solenoid, that is for your K1 control. So that solenoid is off in all ranges except 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry, that solenoid is on in all ranges. It is off in 1, 2, 3, and 4. Same with the N90. That solenoid is on in all ranges except for reverse, third, and fifth. The N282, which is your K2 control solenoid, that solenoid is on except for fourth, fifth, and sixth. And the N283 solenoid, which is your B1 control, is off in second and sixth. The N88 and the N89 may not make too much sense in this chart. However, if we take a look at here at the solenoid functions, you'll see that the N88 and the N89, they're normally closed on-off solenoids, and they're going to be toggled off to on to off in third, fourth, fifth, and sixth gear during each transition of shifts. The N89 is on in Tiptronic mode, third, fourth, and fifth. It's on in sixth gear, and it's toggled on to off in third, fourth, and fifth during each transition in regular driving. If you look at your N90, your N92, N282, and 283, those are all normally applied pulse width modulated solenoids, which are used to control the apply and release of their respective clutches. Solenoid 4, the N91, that's normally vented solenoid, so that's the odd one out. All the other linear solenoids are normally applied. The N91 is normally vented solenoid, and that is used to control the apply and release of the torque converter clutch. Your N93, solenoid number 6, that is your normally applied line pressure solenoid. When duty cycle or amperage is high, line pressure will be lower, and when duty cycle is low, line pressure will be higher. So now back to that N88 and N89, this will make a little bit more sense when you're watching the solenoids on a scan tool. So with a scan tool that's, capable of communicating with this vehicle and getting these solenoid PIDs, you'll see that that N88 is toggled off to on in gear 3, 4, 5, and 6. That solenoid number 2, that N89, that is off to on in 3, 4, 5, and 6, but you've got a distinguisher. You have an H and an M. The H stands for hydraulic, which is a hydraulic gear change, which means the torque converter clutch is not commanded on. And the M is going to be for a mechanical gear change, which means that the TCC is commanded on. If you look at solenoid number 4, your N91, that's your TCC solenoid. You'll see that when the solenoid is off, or when your TCC is off, your amperage on the scan tool is going to read about 0.2 amps. When the solenoid is on, or when the computer is commanding full TC, then your amperage is going to be about 0.98 amps. Now, if you notice on that N89 with that 3H and 3M, that's kind of like a gateway solenoid. When that solenoid is on for the mechanical shift, it allows for lockup to take place. If for some reason, if that solenoid fails off, you're not going to get lockup. Even though the computer turns that N91 solenoid on and ramps that duty cycle up, you're still not going to get a TC apply. So keep that in mind with that solenoid and its function. Your N93 solenoid number 6, which is your line pressure solenoid, that solenoid is modulated constantly based on inputs to the TCM to control pressure. Again, higher amperage, lower pressure, lower amperage, higher pressure. And as far as your other solenoids go, when the solenoid is fully on electrically, 0.98 amps, and when it's off, 0.1 amp. It's pretty basic, and they all work exactly the same. So when the solenoid is fully commanded on and the clutch is off, 0.98. When the clutch is on, 0.1. This is a common issue that I get calls on all the time. Guys cross-connecting the solenoid wires. This slide here will show you the locations of the solenoids on the valve body, and it'll give you the wire colors so that you can avoid making that cross-connection mistake. Note the area up here at the top where the solenoid harness, where that wire harness comes through below the valve body, and the one that is at the bottom edge of that slide where that harness comes through. Make sure when you are installing the valve body that you route those harnesses correctly. If you do not, you're not going to be able to get them connected properly, and you likely will have a cross connection issue, which are going to cause you a number of problems or neutrals or things like that, depending upon which solenoid has been cross connected. Solenoid resistance chart. So using the connector diagram, for instance, the N88 solenoid, use the red lead of your meter on pin 1, which is a white wire. The black lead of your meter is going to go to case ground. 10 to 16 ohms is what you should see on a meter. On your linear solenoids, they should all be the same. Red lead to the high side, black lead to the low side. For instance, pin 7 and pin 8 for your N90 solenoid. And your resistance should be between 4 and 8 ohms. When you're testing these solenoids on the bench, in the car, whatever, you want to make sure when you're testing for resistance that all of the solenoids are the same temperature. If you have a solenoid that is not the same temperature, then there is a very high likelihood that when you're doing an ohm test, you may have solenoids that will check differently. And you could have as much as 1 or 2 ohms of difference based upon the heat or coolness of the coil. So you always want to make sure that you test those solenoids at the same temperature. And then, when the solenoids are all at the same temperature, if you have a variance in your resistance check, for the low ohm solenoids, if it's more than a half an ohm, that's a good indication that that coil is weak. Same thing with the 10 to 16 ohm with your on-off solenoids. If those solenoids are within, let's say 1 to 2 ohms of one another, that could create an issue. And so you want to be careful when you're looking at that to make sure that those are the same. Now for the next slide, here we show a normally applied PWM solenoid, which is going to be, all of your shift solenoids and your line pressure solenoid. So when the solenoid is off or has low current, you will notice that the solenoid feed is connected to your solenoid control port. So that port's open, and that there will allow the oil to go to your clutch control valve and apply your clutch. When the solenoid is on at high current, your solenoid feed is going to be blocked. So as current comes up, as your current rises and the computer turns the solenoid on, this valve is going to move forward in against the spring, and then that valve is going to block that solenoid control port. That port will be closed, and instead the exhaust passage port will be open. Now here's your normally vented solenoid. This will be your TCC solenoid, solenoid number 4, N91. With solenoid off or low current, you'll notice that the TCC circuit pressure, that port is closed, and so your solenoid feed oil is open to exhaust, so the solenoid exhausts that pressure, and your TCC is off. With the solenoid on or high current, now that exhaust passage is closed because that valve has moved forward, so that solenoid feed is routed to this TCC circuit pressure with that port open, and that allows for your converter clutch to apply. So here we show the on-off solenoids. They're both normally closed, N88 and N89, they're both the same. When the solenoid is off, your solenoid feed passage into the solenoid, it's closed, it's blocked. So the port is closed going to your control valve pressure. When the computer turns the solenoid on, that solenoid feed is opened. And now that control valve pressure port is open, and it creates that connection through the solenoid and allows that solenoid to function properly. One of the major calls, or I would say probably the most numerous call that I get on these, are valve body issues. Bar nothing else. Just valve body, valve body, valve body. A lot of guys, when they do these units, they automatically just replace the valve body as a standard practice. And a lot of guys just buy them from the dealer, or they'll get one from their aftermarket, or whichever. And so when they call me, what I usually have for the call, he says, hey, I got this valve body and it looks different from, the one I've got. Can I use it? Usually the answer is no. In order to identify properly the correct valve body, you've got to determine a few things. First is going to be the solenoid diameter. Got to look and see whether you got large or small canister solenoids. Okay, there are two different types, large can, small can. The large can is 1 inch in diameter. The small can is 3/4 of an inch, or 0.75. The next thing you have to figure out or determine is, does the valve body require pressure switches? Units that were built before July of 04, they require pressure switches. Those are going to be large canister solenoid valve bodies. Units built after July or during July, they don't take pressure switches. So the pressure switch was eliminated. You can have pressure switches or no pressure switches on a large can valve body. Small can valve body, they don't use pressure switches. The next thing, and I'd say the most important thing, is going to be the oil cooler location. 09G units require a cooler assembly that is located on the case, on the transmission case. It's right up at the top. The 09M units, those require a remote cooler that's not located on the trans. If you mix it up, your trans will fail, your gear train will be smoked. And you'll probably, you'll either be buying planets or you'll be buying a unit. So make sure, this is important, that you've got the right valve body for it, okay? Now, another thing that I would caution, do not interchange large and small can solenoids or valve bodies, regardless of whether the cooler is the correct type and the switch type is correct. You're going to have calibration issues. You will probably have shift issues that you cannot overcome. So just don't do it. Large can, small can, small can. Don't mix them up. So the differences, okay? These are all the differences. You've got 6 different types, okay? I should have listed 09G and /09M. So the 09M has a remote cooler. The 09G has a cooler on the case. Okay, so you've got your large can solenoids with pressure switches and the case mounted cooler. You've got the large can with pressure switches and a remote cooler. You've got the large cans with pressure switches or without pressure switches and a case cooler. And you've got the large cans without pressure switches and a remote cooler. Those are the 4 different large diameters. The small diameters, trans case, cooler, or remote. Those are the 2. So here's a view of the large cans with pressure switches, large cans without pressure switches, small cans, of course, no pressure switches. Now, your cooler application and location, okay? The cooler location is going to be determined by checking for a hole which is either open or closed in a certain area on the separator plate. This is for the 09G case-mounted cooler. The hole that the arrow is pointing to, when that hole is open, that takes the case-mounted cooler. When this hole is open and the other is closed, that takes a remote cooler. Do not mix them up. Make sure you check. Don't mix them up. It's easy to do. And if you mix it up, it's going to be a big failure item. It's going to destroy the planets. So now that we've got the valve body identification taken care of, and we've got, we know which valve body to use and so on, we're going to go through a couple of checks here, vacuum tests, wet air tests, things like that, that we can pin down problems with the valve body to determine whether, that valve body is going to be salvageable. So here are the vacuum test ports for your TCC control valve sleeve and the bore. You've got 2 ports there that you would check to check this little assembly. So here we're checking the TCC control valve, and when we apply the vacuum to it, we notice we've got 8.3 inches. That's a fail test. That test is no good. It fails. That's a worn bore issue. Here we show the pressure ports for your secondary regulator, your main regulator, and your clutches, K1, K2, B1, and K3. Again, when checking the valve body, we apply our vacuum to the secondary pressure regulator bore. We've got 8.3 inches. Fail test. That's no good. Worn bore. So that bore is going to have to be repaired. That valve body is going to have to be repaired or, replaced. Now here's one. We're testing the PR valve, the main PR valve. And when applying vacuum here, we see that we've got over 15.5 inches. This is a pass test. This is good. So, if you've got less than 10, I'd say 12 inches, if it will not hold that much vacuum, that's a fail test. You need to examine for worn bores. Now this slide here, we're going to come back to this slide in just a moment. Here we show a valve body and solenoid cutaway view. That's for your N90, your K3 clutch, solenoid, and regulator valve assembly. If you'll see here on the left side, here's your K3 solenoid. You've got your can. You've got your end cap here with your armature, your valve, and a little washer. You've got your coils, solenoid coils, and then you've got bushings. That's one bushing, and that's another bushing. So there are 2 bushings in the solenoid. Then, of course, you've got your solenoid regulator valve, your spring, and the cap. That solenoid cap must not leak. If it leaks, that solenoid is defective. You're going to have to get a different solenoid, or you're going to have to find a way to seal up that cap. We'll get there in just a moment. This here shows some typical wear issues where these valves are located, where your regulator valve is located. So if we go back here and we look at this passage here, it's 4 down for your K3 clutch. You'll see this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So testing that location with a vacuum test is air checking this area of the bore. So if the vacuum test fails or the wet air test fails, you're looking for wear in that area. On this one here, that passage is 11 down. And so this would be 11 down right here. This test checks your solenoid cap, and it checks the end part of that valve bore. So if you've got a vacuum test that checks out at about 8 inches, that's a fail. Either that valve bore is worn or that solenoid cap is leaking. So we'll move on here. We have an exploded view of the solenoid. Shows the canister. That's the large can. You've got your armature with your valve, your brass washer. You've got your solenoid coil, the solenoid bushings, 2 of them inside, and then you've got your solenoid regulating valve assembly. And here, this shows that solenoid regulating valve assembly. All right, this is for demonstration purposes only. Do not remove the solenoid front cap unless you have a way to crimp it back on and make sure that it seals. That regulator valve spring, it's a heavy spring. There's just no need to take it apart. You should be able to, wash that in solvent and move that valve. If that valve hangs up, get another solenoid. So now, when we check this solenoid on the bench, here's what we want to do. Number 1, we need a vat of hot oil because we're going to have to heat the solenoid up. And I like using a little vat. What I use is one of those Fry Daddies. Just picked one up at Lowe's, an oil fryer. I heat that oil up and stick a thermometer in there, check the oil temp. I dunk my solenoid in. I get the solenoid heated up to about 200 degrees, and that's when I check it. The majority of the issues that I see with solenoids on these is when they get hot, 180, 190, 200, whatever, the bushings inside in that valve, inside that canister, they start to seize up. So what we do to check that is we get that solenoid good and hot. Then, when you pull it out, you're going to have something to hold it so you don't burn yourself. Then use a small screwdriver, pry the valve to the left, okay, compressing the solenoid regulator spring, all right, and then shake the solenoid from side to side. And listen, see if that valve inside moves back and forth freely. If it doesn't move freely, that solenoid's defective. It's going to need to be repaired or replaced. And I'm not just an advocate of just replacing them. Which brings us here. Solenoid cleaning kit. These tools are great. These kits come with the tools to disassemble and reassemble the solenoid cans. They have them for the large canister AW solenoids and small canister AW solenoids. All right, this one here happens to be for the large canister AW solenoids, and it should work across the Asian Warner line for the large cans. The tool kits and parts are available from your supplier so that you can clean and repair these solenoids. You can get bushings and washers, solenoid end caps, everything that you need to bring these solenoids back to good working order. As well, that toolkit has a demonstration DVD that takes you step by step to the removable of the can, to remove the can, the back plate off the can, and go through that solenoid. Great tools. Now, keep in mind that tool is about $600, somewhere between $500 and $600. You're going to have large can, you're going to have small can, so you're looking at $1,000 or better to buy both kits. If you've bought a valve body recently, you're probably spending close to $1,000 or so. So, it's worth it to, get a kit, play with it, and learn to redo those solenoids. Save yourself some money, save your customer some money, give them great value, and it's gonna bring a new dynamic to the way that you look at units and how you repair them, especially in regards to solenoids. So after we've done all these things, you've been through the unit, you've gone through the valve body, you've checked everything, you've reassembled the valve body, and you're ready to go, you're going to have to clear and relearn this thing. So the best way to do it is to use an OEM scan tool or a similar, aftermarket OEM style scanner to return your TCM to basic setting. There are some models which can be reset by removing power to the TCM or just disconnecting the connector. When you go to reset your adapts, make sure that you clear any codes from the car and make sure that no codes return. If they do, you need to take care of that first. Then bring your vehicle to operating temperature. You're going to have to get it up, 180, 200 degrees, and then drive the vehicle. The way that I do it is I use a very, very light throttle, like going through a parking lot. I allow the vehicle to shift up through all 6 gears. Then I lift throttle and I allow the weight of the vehicle to bring it to a stop, or I use very light braking. You need to give it at least 30 seconds or better, 30 to 40 seconds of stopping on its own, all right, so that it can relearn downshifts and things like that. Repeat that cycle at least 15 times. The next thing is your garage shifts. Press the brake and hold it. Don't let it go. Move your selector to neutral. Hold it for 3 seconds. Move the selector to drive. Hold it for 3 seconds. Then move it back to neutral. You got to do that at least 5 times. Do the same thing for reverse and repeat that at least 5 times. This is the way that I like to reset the adapts, using the VAG-COM tool. Rostec was nice enough to let us use some of their screenshots, which we will see in just a moment. So we want to thank them. So for basic setting and kickdown adjustment, what we want to do, the prerequisites, make sure there are no fault codes in the trans. Make sure your throttle body alignment is performed successfully, if applicable, okay, or when applicable. It'll show you on the tool. Make sure that the ignition's on and the engine's off, and do not touch the accelerator pedal. Then when the tool's hooked up, you click on Select, then O2 Auto Trans, then Basic Settings 04. Then you'll change your values and set group to 001 and click on Go. Don't touch the accelerator. Then you should see in green on the scanner, should say System in Grundeinstellung. That will be displayed on the scanner. At that point, click Done and go back. And it's all finished. So it's normal for there to not be any explicit instructions or changes or anything on the screen when you run it through that procedure, okay, other than see that System in Grundeinstellung. So now, caution, okay? If any faults are stored in the engine or trans for throttle-related issues, this procedure, it won't work, okay? It will fail. That's why you can't touch the accelerator pedal. If the computer thinks that the accelerator pedal has moved, test is invalid. So here we have these screenshots. So back to step 1, we hit Select. We just click on Select. And again, this is a PC-based program. So you can download this program from their website, get their connector, and pay for a license fee. And you can have, a basic factory scan tool for under $500. It's really a great deal. So step 1, we press Select. Then we go to O2 Auto Trans. Then we click on Basic Settings 04. The next thing we do is we enter 001 in that group label and click Go. At that point, you should see that System in Grundeinstellung, and then you click Done and go back. You're finished. It's that quick. So now you've done all this, you've relearned it, you've driven it, and you still have some issues where your shift's just not quite dialed in. Fortunately, on these, you've got adjusters for your clutches, for your K1, your K2, your B1, and your K3. These adjusters, as you saw in that cutaway view, are at the end of the regulator valve. So those adjusters can be adjusted. They can be turned clockwise or anti-clockwise in order to firm the shift or decrease the firmness of the shift. This chart here will show you your solenoid adjustment. So you go and you look at your B1 brake, your K1 clutch, your K2, your K3, depending upon what issue you may be having. For instance, say you have a 1-2 flare, you look at your 1-2 flare, that's the B1 brake. It says adjust screw counterclockwise. That'll increase your pressure to correct the shift. If you've got an overlap or a bump, you'll go clockwise to decrease your pressure. Depending upon the severity of the flare or the bump, that'll determine how much you're going to make the adjustment. If the flare is kind of minimal to maybe medium, I would go 3/4 to 1 turn. So counterclockwise, 3/4 to 1 turn for a small 1-2 flare. If you've got a larger 1-2 flare, you may need to go 1 to 2 turns. Once you've done it a few times, you'll feel the flare and have an idea of how much you need to turn it. Same thing with your overlap or your bumping. If it's minor, 3/4 to 1 turn. And if it's much greater, then you may need to go up to 2 turns or so. If you can't overcome this, then we'll need to move on to the next thing. Here's case air checks. That should have already been done. If you have a flare that you can't overcome, you're going to need to air check the clutch. But before you pull the valve body back down, you're going to want to run a pressure test. This shows your B1 brake and your K3 clutch, and this shows your K2, K1, B2, and so on. So if you've got a flare or something like that you're unable to overcome, you're going to want to get a gauge on it and find out what your pressure's doing. If you've got a flare that you can't overcome, and you want to see if the pressure's low. Here's your pressure chart. If you look at this, for instance, when on your K1 clutch, when you go to select this thing into gear, sitting still, you're probably going to see that gauge come up to about 30 psi, and it's going to hedge for just a moment, just a fraction of a second. And then as the engagement completes, you'll see that pressure come up to about 75 psi. It should be a really quick transition. If there's a delayed transition, that indicates solenoid issue. If the pressure's low and you can't get 70 psi on this thing, say you can only get 50, that indicates a leak. That's when you got to pull that valve body down, air check that clutch. So use those minimum PSIs for as the clutch is applying, and the max PSI, that's going to be when you're at least half to 3/4 throttle or better. And those are the pressures you should be seeing then. And so guys, that's what I've got for you today. I want to thank you all for attending this webinar. Again, sponsored by Transtar. And I really want to thank you all for coming. I hope to see you again soon. If you have any questions, let me know. If you don't have any right now or you have some later, just give me a call, shoot me an email, and we'll be happy to help you. Thanks again. Have a great day.